and an urgent astrological presentation. We are in the midst of a Saturn Neptune alignment. Many astrologers know that. You've been watching me for a while. I've given a couple of presentations about this very thing. In the past, I've looked at some historical precedents going back to when Neptune was discovered, because we are talking about Saturn Neptune alignments that happened every 36 years. And we are now in the middle of it. It is happening. And I had, in the last years, been ringing the bells, asking people to pay attention, but seeing is believing. And here we are. So here we have the Saturn Neptune factor, and we're doing more than blowing steam right now. I'm actually doing this on the 4th of July, and just yesterday we had this a big bad bill that was really shoved through, and really the country is again divided, and from time to time it has been divided. There's an interesting alignment connected to that too, actually, with Neptune, and it's all in the stars, one could say. But this actually is an urgent presentation, specifically to give an overview of what's happening, that we perhaps can get some perspective from the stars. Well, introducing the players. We are talking about Saturn and Neptune. Beautiful AI image here of these two planets. And every 36 years, they align and major things happen politically, socially, internationally. And we are now in the middle of the storm. It is happening. And it's a beautiful alignment on some levels, but it depends on whose side you're on. Introducing the characters, talking about Saturn first, we have Father Time, Chronos, chronology, and there is a time to do things, and let's get going. Saturn wants action. It's organized and oftentimes governmental. It can play quite easily the stern father who knows best and will set boundaries and tell us it's time to, get our acts together. But then it can also be the next project. Let's do it. Let's come on. It is time to do things. Now, when you mix that with other things like government, it's time to organize. With art, it's time to paint. It's just time. And it recognizes we need to have some action. By the way, I have these images with wording, with descriptions, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. That's why we have the visual, and you can pause the recording at any time to take a look at things. Okay, Neptune, the other planet here, discovered it in 1846, and when it was discovered, it was right next to Saturn. And Neptune can inspire. It was really the planet associated to the age of Pisces, and that was the previous age of religions, large institutions, but also great belief systems. And sometimes that inspired, but sometimes it conspired to the point of burning witches, the Inquisition, the Holy Wars, because it goes to my vision of the truth is the correct one. And that's where, even though Neptune can truly expand and inspire, it can also conspire. We can go towards this back then, 1846, Thoreau going off into the woods by Walden Pond. Edgar Allan Poe wrote of other things, poetry and imagination. Again, you can read this here, but Neptune is so complex. It's vacuous. It's like gas. It's solutions. It goes into dreams and that can inspire, but it also can be confusing, off towards drugs, stupors, hallucinations, but also the belief in a benevolent God. It can, but all of that is like hard to possess, hard to hold together because it's of the stuff of ideals and beliefs and dreams. But on the physical level, it represents other things that are also hard to grasp, like liquids, oils, petroleum, gas, also in the medical world, um, illnesses, viruses, and things unseen. So tiny, but so powerful. In this divine dance, we can say if they are evenly balanced and there's, the right amount of the structure of Saturn and the timing and the desire to get things done so that we accomplish our goals. And what are the goals? It is inspired by Neptune. And Neptune of ideals, empathy, dreams, possibilities, but it can also be, religious fanaticism and a personal belief system that I am right, then giving the ball back to Saturn that says, okay, we are right, and this is how it's going to be. One of the interesting things that I have, again, presented in the past was the communist timeline. And take a look at those dates. 1846, that, Marx Engels, 1882, Karl Marx died. The International Working People's Association, 1917, major, that was World War I, but also the Bolshevik Revolution. But again, the Neptunian ideals are showing up in many times in many places, including the Marian apparitions near Fatima, Portugal. 1953 didn't seem to be as momentous as some of these others, but that's when Stalin died, and that was a major thing for the Soviet Union. Um, the Korean War was ending, and then we had the Red Scare right here in the United States. Major here, the last time that they got together, Saturn Neptune, 1989, and that was the fall of the Berlin Wall. That was, again, so major, and things were happening all around the world. Tiananmen Square in China, and that government chose to really push down on the protests. But in the Soviet Union, it was the opposite. They just said, well, let the people go. And that's what we can be looking at right now here, 25 and 26, these 2 years. We've got the Trump and MAGA and ICE agents and the forgiving of the January 6th people who may now be ICE agents for all we know, because they're not identifying themselves. But again, we're back to belief systems that then is focused towards Saturnian organization, and that could be militia. When there is such strong pressure, the alternate is a pushback. And we have got protests, not only in the United States, but internationally. People are standing up all over the world. Taking a look also at these alignments, and the sign that they are found in is also important, adding a particular flavor. And you can see right here, we have those Leo, Libra, Capricorn, and now Aries. Aries, the new starts, individual, fire energy. Let's get things going. And it can be mavericks, it can be individuals like the billionaire class. I mean, very few individuals, but it's all about the individual. but also free capitalism. I mean, like Wild West capitalism. It's fire, it's energy. Let's do it. So that could be aggressive and so forth. But the kickback, the pushback will be connected also with a bunch of individuals who will say, no, I'm not going to be controlled by you. Neptune brings in again the ideals, but the ideals associated and inspired by dreams, high vision perspectives, and this goes back, way back in history. Peter Kropotkin has this great quote: competition is the law of the jungle, but cooperation is the law of civilization. And that's what we're looking at, this shift right there. I came across this particular sign while I was in Europe not that long ago. And in Europe, so it was the French Republic energy. And here we have the 1794, the value of a legacy. You are nothing more than the trustees of goods for which the great family is entitled to call you to account. Barbarians and slaves detest science and seek to destroy artistic monuments, while free men love them and preserve them. Again, what we're up against right now. I did a study since the 1800s, actually some ideas and patterns before that, but the patterns that I have seen, the themes that have come up consistently in history are all of these subtitles. So it's not just a government sort of thing, who happens to be in charge. It can be in individuals and communities, and that inspiration, that Neptunian desire to fly high or to get lost in their own psychosis, but then always with this alignment, Saturn says, okay, and now it's time to do it. Let's get it going. So these bullets here are just very quickly, because we're going to go into each of them, what's happening here, 2025, 2026. With all of these, the communist or socialist movements, even trade unions, and the backlash. Yeah, they are formed, organized, and there is a backlash, pushback. I have seen with these alignments, we've got the bullies and the victims, and we're seeing that again today. And the declarations of independence, again, from that list that you have already seen. By the way, it doesn't have to be just those conjunctions. It can be in opposition with these two on opposite sides of the sky of Saturn and Neptune, or a square 90 degrees, etc. Then we have like communist-like groups, collected monies in support for social and community benefit. And to a certain extent, that is not the bogeyman communism, socialism, but when people get together and pool their monies, pool their efforts together for the good of either the whole community or maybe for the good of a subgroup, that is a communist alignment right there. During these times, we've got callings and visions. I've mentioned the Marian apparition already, and history is full of other people that had visions. So there will be those right now having them, 2025. The higher octave of Venus, of the woman, is Neptune, of the divine feminine. And so feminist ideals are right front and center. And along with that is the compassion of like the Mother Mary, or the feminine perspective of caring for, the disenfranchised, the babies, the ones who can't protect themselves. And that represents also minority rights. Interestingly enough, royal news, royal changes, monarchies, show up with these shifts. And even though this is a kind of like a social, we're all on the same, level field here, ideals of Saturn, Neptune, well, that is a pattern that shows up. And I'll be expecting some of that also now. The drugs, alcohol, illness, and then medical news. liquids, elixirs, solutions, very Neptune. But then Saturn says, okay, let's analyze it, let's produce it, let's bring it up to focus. Of course, Neptune, the god of the seas, maritime. And what happens? The great um, storms out in sea, floods, winds, disasters, crazy notions, mental illness news. We've already seen some of that. There's more to come. Then I had a category one for the books. It's like it is such an odd thing. It's such a weird thing, but there it is happening at this time. Again, I'm thinking of where can the inspiration of Neptune that knows no bounds, where can that go? Time and space, including time zones. Not a big thing, but a consistent thing whenever they get together. And then the picture time, and that can be at the early times, cameras picture at a particular time. But in our modern age, it's like Zoom. It's like this picture with a clock, tick tock, and it's all right there for us to see. Okay, all this is happening right now, 2025, in Aries, cardinal sign. And this brings it even more into focus. It is a very strong power. It is a uh, exciting, optimistic, enthusiastic, outgoing power, and let's get it done. And so there's vehemence, there is excitement, there is drive, that can be stubborn or quarrelsome if challenged, and it can be thoughtless and even destructive. But it can also be brave and strong and protective. And we've got many examples in history of braveries that have been accomplished during these times or whenever there's a strong Mars or Aries dynamic in individual charts and so forth. The ruler is the planet Mars, and so Mars is going to be especially significant during these times as a crusader and maybe a trigger to get things done. What we have just recently, and so now this is very present here, just the end of March of 2025, just not long ago. We had Neptune that went into Aries, and for those into astrology looking in at this chart on the left-hand side, in the 12th house, all of these charts, by the way, are set for Washington, D.C., and Aries is right there in the 12th house, the total sign engulfed right there. And several planets in Pisces. You can see Saturn up there in the 11th house, moving towards Aries as it is right now. At the time, then we had the sun, of course, in Aries, but the moon in Aries. It was a new moon at the same time that Neptune goes in there. And a powerful focus. But I also would have you pay attention here that up top, I think you can see my cursor, we have the Pluto right straight up in the sky in the 10th house of government and so forth. And we're talking about a plutocracy in the United States, ruled by the wealthy, by the rich, an oligarchy. And indeed, that is the case. And it squares the ascendant descendant. And so it will have its way, and it's got the funds, the means, the duplicity sometimes, backroom deals. It's also happening right there. Also, I'd have you pay attention down here at the bottom where we have Mars right there next to the fourth house cusp, and it can be violent. And we have got ICE agents in the streets. We've got people being locked up, and as well as aggressiveness, right, in the executive branch. That Neptune that just went into Aries, the last time it was there was in 1861. Yeah, and that was the Civil War. So it has a special alignment with the United States. And again, the idealism of Neptune wanting to free the slaves, but then the pushback of no, you won't. And so, of course, we have the Civil War. So, metaphysically, I wonder, since it has such a flavor of this, and Pluto, by the way, also played an important part in the Civil War, splitting the country, brother against brother, as it were. Uh, and so I ask, is the South rising again? And if you take a look at the patterns there, in the months since Trump's inauguration, individuals, congressmen, governors, and one could even say states were ceding from the Constitution. You see the parallel there. Underhandedly, no proclamations of leaving the country, as in the Civil War, but they're going to follow some rules that look fairly similar if, again, we take a look back at the Civil War. White supremacist aggression. It's our way or the highway. Another hat that I wear, I'm a transpersonal hypnotherapist, and I believe that the United States is dealing also with collective karma. What have we done as a nation to the minorities, to blacks, to slaves, to women, to the savages, as they were termed, I think in the Declaration of Independence, the Native Americans here and all of what they did or didn't do. So I wonder, have the Confederates reincarnated? And this time they really want to do it right, far right. Then, to add to the drama, we have Saturn entering Aries here. And again, not long ago, here's the 24th of May, things really amped up. Now they're both of those planets. Again, watching my cursor, we will find them down here in the second house, and they are both now in Aries. And here we have the storm happening and really strong ideas, whatever that belief system happens to be, whether you are on the left or the right, it's a strong belief system that says, yeah, let's do it. And of course, when it's in the executive powers, he's got the power to enact various sorts of things. But as we know, it's a lot more temperamental and knee-jerk reaction and impulsiveness. Again, set for Washington, D.C., here is Pluto now in the first house, so we're taking it really personally at this point, as the bully boy, when one can say. And that Pluto is now square Moon here in Taurus in the third house, and legislation has been front and center. Again, it's going to be, the focus upon they will have it their way, and we're going to make it into law. And that's what we've been looking at. Here is something, from one of my heroes, Heather Cox Richardson. Thank goodness for this historian giving us a daily brief. But back here in early March, this is what was in one of her columns that, again, I'm sure she doesn't follow astrology. And this other quote is from someone who probably doesn't follow astrology. John Simpson of the BBC noted recently that there are years when the world goes through some fundamental convulsive change. 7 weeks in, he suggested 2025 is on track to be one of them. A time when the basic assumptions about the way our world works are fed into the shredder. It's really, again, astrologically perfect. And although they don't know it is astrologically perfect, there it is. Saturn and Neptune are not alone there in the skies, and there are really interesting alignments going on. And Jupiter just went into Cancer 9th of June, and that really amped things up because Jupiter is like legislative ideas, international, excited, now adding more of enthusiasm, but it is a square to the Saturn Neptune when Jupiter is there. And so there's more of an extremism that shows up there. The next thing coming here is Uranus going into Gemini here the 7th of July, in my perspective right here, just in a few days from now. Okay, then, so that's the big picture. And so now we're going to break it down. I'll try and speed this up, but it is a big deal. We're going to be taking a look at that list that I have described earlier, and we'll see what happens here in 2025, 2026 in each of these categories. So here we go. We're now going to go through the list. These are the big points. These are the themes that I have discussed before. And now we're going to move on to each of them and what may happen, recognizing some of the different names, the individuals, the people who represent actually some of these different planetary dynamics, how they will show up in the big drama, the big story as it comes to us. So, recognizing Saturnian authority following some Neptunian belief system, BS, will be an aspect of what we're going to be looking at. This particular picture shows a very large Saturn, which is mostly an overbearing authority figure, a father figure, and that could be the international dictators, the those who want to maintain their authority no matter what, and then little Neptune next to it, and they have like very little beliefs, basically. Now, it could also show up that Neptune or the Neptunian energy could be really quite strong to the point where they have an over estimation of self or their abilities, but there's still a Saturnian authority. So it can show up in a couple of different ways. They're just dancing the cosmic dance, and individuals here upon the earth just play them out for our, let's say, amusement, frustration, and reaction. Because I believe, like, bottom line is that spirit, that the divine intelligence of this universe really wants to wake us up so that we get it. We say, God, the lessons involved, we probably shouldn't allow certain people to have so much power and authority. How do they get that? Well, there are steps along the way, and usually the gendarmes or the military or the police or the bodyguards are protecting them somehow. Interestingly enough, connected to that, back to this authority thing, as well as the Neptunian belief system, when even the individual military or ICE agents or police, when their belief system is that I need to uphold the Constitution, not an individual, not some inflated ego person, and really do the right thing, standing up for the community, civil society, and so forth. That is probably getting closer to what I think the universe is wanting us to learn. So we're going to take these step by steps, and I'll try and be as quick as possible, recognizing that you do have all of this here visually for you, and you can read it as your own leisure. Communist or social movements, even trade unions, and backlash. So I'll be watching out for new collectives, even parties, and even Elon Musk was talking about starting a party, maybe connected to it has to be like junior Republican or in his own image, of course. Mavericks and visionaries are going to be seen here too. And some of the nations I will mention here very soon may try their hand at reorganizing demanding visionary leaders. Basically, they're all out here, these visionaries, these mavericks, these people with something to say that will lead us or lead the individual nations into the good waters of peace and harmony. They're ready to go, but there's just as many bullies out there too. Obviously, in the bully category, would be, Trump and his team, um, siphoned off from Fox News of all places, MAGA, and their belief systems as, thinking that they are the chosen people at this point. I'm wondering if they're at one point they're going to perhaps get a sense that they are following the beast. That's also religious. That's also part of the belief system. But to be fooled that way, how about that? There have been the protests, the rebellions, the social rebellions. June 14th was the most recent here in my timeline. And that was, of course, Donald Trump's birthday. And it was a military parade that was rather embarrassing because it wasn't so well attended. Then, of course, this is where the Jupiter part comes in, legislation striving to pass the big bountiful bill, the big bad bill, and so forth, which was, you know, pushed through here on July 4th, signed on July 14th, evidently. And what a great birthday for the United States. We've got the president of China, also born in a Saturn Neptune conjunction, also Putin, born one. But the thing about Russia, how many thousands and thousands of his own people have died with this war with the Ukraine, and probably millions of people are not in line with him and with his cadre, but they're too afraid to protest. Maybe during this time they will stand up. That may come forth here very soon as the planet Uranus of the other opposition, the voice of possibilities, goes into Gemini. And that's very soon. And that will be making a positive aspect, what's called a sextile to the Saturn Neptune. So I'm having a little bit more hope coming up here in July and August, September, with contrary voices coming to the fore. Then the declarations of independence, and that can be truly like it was in 1989, but it can be a popular uprising just saying we need reform, we need to do it some other way. Various countries on the diaper change list: the United States, Russia, Israel, Turkey, Serbia, Koreas, both North and South. South Sudan has always been a mess. Georgia, protesting there too. Basically, wherever in the world that the people are unhappy with the authority, with those who are in charge, that's where we're going to be seeing some major shifts, major changes. Some hope along the way. Again, going back to 1989, the last time that we had that conjunction, a wonderful example of a positive, peaceful revolution called the Singing Revolution, starting in Estonia. And then here we have some images of the Baltic Way, a human chain of 2 million people holding hands and being in solidarity. This was a very good example of countries in a peaceful manner separating from the Soviet bloc. Continuing here with other things, recognizing that when there's so much turmoil and frightened people and military backlashes and so forth, so there could be more refugees, migrations, mass movements. And I'm thinking of that as the Neptune floods of people across Saturnian borders. So there are communist-like groups which collect money in support for social and community benefit. Well, the American healthcare system needs an overhaul. And I would say, just as Bernie Sanders has been talking about for a long time, maybe we can follow a good working Scandinavian model. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already been done many different countries and quite well. Some industries and big businesses will be nationalized. Doesn't, I'm not just talking about the United States here, but again, who's running those particular businesses, conglomerates, organizations, and the typical reaction from capitalists would be, oh, communism, communism. But I believe that the younger generation is not so affected by this old bogeyman. And as I emphasized here, community libraries and organizations and even the military are basically common or communal communist in essence, gathering the monies and putting them towards the use of community. Callings and visions. Several synagogues here just in April in New York refused to host an Israel's far-right national security minister. And then we have the visions of the U.S. Manifest Destiny belief that was in the 1846 conjunction. And how many are also thinking, whether that be in Israel or in other countries, like the manifest destiny that a certain people or a particular group of people should naturally be in charge. We're certainly seeing that in the United States. We have a new pope during this transition, and that's Pope Leo the 14th, which is by a fire sign name, and he's the first American pope. And so far seems to be shining a good light. Feminist and minority rights. The Handmaid's Tale is an image, and it has been brought up several times here as a warning. But there seems to be those who are thinking of it as an ideal, you know, of keeping women back where they belong, and basically as second-class citizens. That is almost reminiscent of something 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 2,000 years ago. Um, really striving to put women down as well as minorities. And of course, the whole attack on DEI across many different organizations and governmental uh, oversight here is an attack on in this very main way. I predict that new women leaders will emerge in the US and internationally. Royal news is also definitely a part of this. And King Charles, we have heard, is not well. He had cancer not too long ago. Then there's the tensions with his son Harry, scandals, of course, with his brother. And so I'd say watch out for surprises. And that's only the British royal family. Norway is undergoing this spring a crisis, and sexual assault charges against son of Norwegian crown princess. His name is Marius, in his 20s, and he's evidently drug and alcohol is involved. Um, Evidently pretty happy with his privileged position, but did not know his bounds. Then I wonder, could Donald Trump be included in this royalty group? Not too long ago, he posted a picture of himself as a pope, and now they're talking about him as, we should call him daddy. This is certainly crazy stuff. And that socialist perspective on royalty. Back to the ideals here of Saturn Neptune. Monies collected from the public, similar to tribute, like for fire or police departments or libraries, but then being collected and used for the privileged, for the monarchies. That is a thing. And I'd be paying attention to other royal families around the world, like maybe in Thailand, maybe Japan. Then the category of drug, alcohol, illness, medical news, and so forth. The CDC in the United States is in trouble. Also, FEMA has been reduced, and that, of course, is supposedly there to come into aid in emergency situations. Medical research also has been stalled here. So, yeah, this is certainly one of the big areas of conflict, which brings us back to a little bit of hope. Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, "We had to struggle with the old enemies of peace, business and financial monopoly, speculation, reckless banking, class antagonism, sectionalism, war profiteering. They had begun to consider the government of the United States as a mere appendage to their own affairs. We know now that government by organized money is just as dangerous as government by organized mob." And I believe right now we've got a little bit of mixture of the two. And yes, we could use a little bit more of that New Deal. Back to the list and continuing on with the drug and alcohol, illness, medical news. There are probably so many innovative breakthroughs, improvements, new remedies. I expect some really great breakthroughs coming in internationally. Then as far as the U.S. healthcare system connected to insurance companies, again, Saturnian business with medical sorts of things, Neptune, that's not only in the insurance health industry, but also in the pharmaceutical industry. People like Luigi came up and assassinated one of the executives. And the surprising thing was that he became kind of a hero very quickly, which showed that there's a larger discontent, to say the least, connected to the American insurance company. The USDA, this is now in the news, withdraws a plan to limit salmonella levels in raw poultry. I mean, again, could you have imagined that a couple of years ago? Last year. Then, Kennedy, I'm sure his uncle and father are rolling in their graves. He tells Congress here in May 2025 that they probably shouldn't listen to his medical advice. But of course, he's in charge of that. Then he hires people that he already fired from the CDC and the National Institute of Health and other organizations. It's pretty much chaos. In the meantime, and this just came out here a month ago, bacteria in summer waters, various places in the US, could be toxic, which parallels our politics. Then we have liquids, elixirs, solutions. What drug will be the next fad? This, by the way, everything I'm saying right now is like probable news in various ways in 25 and 26. It's here in our faces, and just notice what happens. What scandals will the petroleum world bring us? Of course, the bombing of Iran, that was a thing. That's affecting gas prices. Then, of course, Russia, then the desire to open up more fracking, and of course, disallowing or thinking that there is no climate change. That's all a big lie. So we can do whatever we want. And so let's dig out that coal. Neptune, of course, the king of the sea. And so you have to imagine go towards the maritime arenas, shipping, and but then the winds go upon the shores too, and that means tornadoes and hurricanes and flood disaster too. I wouldn't be being on any big ships right now this year and next. Storms, floods, such as the spring emergencies in the southern states right after exactly right after Neptune entered Aries, flooding in Virginia and Maryland in May 2025. I just expect more of that, not only in the US, but around the world. Things are shaking. Lots of winds are blowing. Here's a news piece here on April 22nd. America's tornadoes so far this year are on a pace not seen in 14 years and may have set a new all-time record for one spring month, with the typically most active month of the year still ahead. Meanwhile, of course, I've already mentioned that the funding for FEMA has been scuttled. Crazy notions, mental illness news, that has been a category every single alignment. And at this point, it seems like the Republican Party moving like lemmings towards a cliff. I mean, the whole thing about, wanting to call Trump daddy, belief systems right there, mass hypnosis fueled by Fox and other propaganda outlets. Again, the Neptunian, not only a belief system, but at this point, imagination, wild stories, alternative facts, but then Saturn that says this is a business, Fox News is a business, and let's get it out there. Let's get people riled up. And then when they get emotional about things, we can start redirecting them. The rapture, I mean, again, any religious sort of thing is permeating the religious right, and destruction. They want destruction because it's going to bring Jesus back to earth. Okay, cooked up in Pisces the last few years, alternative facts, fake news, conspiracy theories, now grouped and organized in Saturnian political system, invading right now for the last few months governmental departments and agencies. And I still wonder, back to the mystery of it all, how much Vladimir Putin has an influence on Trump and the White House. Again, we need a breath of fresh air, but this is from 1945. Again, Roosevelt and his second Bill of Rights suggestions. The right of employment, of adequate income for food, shelter, and recreation. A farmer's rights to a fair income. Freedom from unfair competition and monopolies. Decent housing. This is now a Bill of Rights for everyone. Adequate medical care, Social Security, and education. All of this is pretty much under attack. Other crazy notions, mental illness news, Israel mirroring Nazi tactics is really the big crazy. Of all the different subgroups in the world to act in the way that they have been for some years under a very right-wing cabinet and then the war criminal Netanyahu. But yeah, wow, what a mess. But again, in a similar sense to manifest destiny, which is another belief system, and people with a personal belief system that they are better than others, subgroup, it's just a perfect alignment with the Saturn Neptune. Here, Earth Day, April 22nd, just a few months ago here, a teen was arrested on suspicion of starting a massive New Jersey wildfire that consumed at least 15,000 acres, and it continued to burn for a week. I mean, that's crazy. And shooting innocent people is so common here. And it's just, but it's more crazy. It just should not be happening, but it will happen even more during this time. Then that category, one for the books. I mean, it seems to be so out of the norm, but It's the norm. Here on the end of March 2025, there was a 7.7 magnitude earthquake that struck Myanmar, causing significant destruction. The earthquake killed more than 3,700 people and left 60,000 people living in tent encampments. And that was just one earthquake. And here is something, this is the title of an article, okay, on March 31st. It says 5 things to know for March 31st. Myanmar earthquake, Gaza, Trump third term, extreme weather, and police suicides. Wow. And that was just as things were just, amping up there. Then, one for the books, Donald Trump ignoring a 9-0 ruling by the Supreme Court in April. He created this Supreme Court monster, by the way. Now he was flipping them off. Will they keep supporting him? It seems that they do. Then, of course, that impulsive bombing of Iran, maybe doing favors for Netanyahu. At other points, Trump and Hegseth doing favors for Putin. Bottom line is that Trump believes he is impervious to failure or pushback. He just keeps on pushing. But Trump's chart, he's a Gemini, of course, the 14th of June, shows all of the impulsiveness, aggression, and self-concern. It is just, most astrologers see that. Transitions during this time. And of course, the big one was we had to say goodbye to Pope Francis. And again, this image of Saturn and Neptune and the Catholic Church or any large institution, religious institution, is a Neptunian organization. And Saturn is there right next to it that says, and here is the head of said institutions. And this was a big transition. We said goodbye to Francis and hello to Leo. We have created new idols. The worship of the ancient golden calf has returned in a new and ruthless guise in the idolatry of money and the dictatorship of an impersonal economy lacking a truly human purpose. May that be sung out loudly. As we continue down and coming up to finishing these points here, daylight savings time, not a big thing, but it fits into the pattern. And I know that it has been discussed that maybe we're going to get rid of the daylight savings time. We'll see. Picture and time, put that together and we've got movies. But also, think about also videos and music videos and new releases, inspiration too. The big movie company out of Hollywood, and I could go around the world with the German cinema and the French cinema and India cinema and so forth. But anyway, here's a couple of really interesting things. I actually won't say all of them, but read about, like the movie Warfare that just came out, or Black Bag, How to Train Your Dragon. Yeah, see how Saturn and Neptune are playing with all of these different things. I've mentioned music, and there was that really interesting alignment here. There was a square of Saturn Neptune in 1945, and that's when in the Rodgers and Hammerstein's Carousel, the musical piece "You'll Never Walk Alone" first came out. And then another square, 1963, Gary and the Pacemakers came out with a version of that. And, the lovely and inspiring lyrics. So I have to mention something like this too, because it's not all doom and gloom. There are visionaries right now. There are musicians, there are poets, there are people who are wanting to birth something beautiful and inspiring, and they're out there. And this is just one example of, wow, look at this. And whenever these two planets aligned, there was a new interpretation, a new wave of this particular song that is shown over here back in 1989, when You'll Never Walk Alone became part of the Liverpool football anthem. And they just have been singing it loudly since then. But it came from a tragedy in 1989. A couple more pictures and times. Ballerina. And ballerina as a killing machine dancer. It's like, well, is that a crazy idea? But look at the alignment going on here. Then we have Sinners and then The Life of Chuck. And the Life of Chuck here as a movie is like a feel-good Stephen King movie. Huh? How does that fit in? Anyway, these are just some of the different movies coming out right now. So that was the list. And now let me say a couple extra things about where we're heading here towards 2026. Be on the lookout for mavericks, entrepreneurs, and pioneers. They are wanted, they are needed, and not for their financial schemes. There will be a kickback against the billionaire class, and that is growing. The I am right party wants to spin all the news, but then there's a pushback for personal freedom. And what we see, of course, is a nation divided, and that is going to be found in several other nations internationally. Humanists and individuals versus conformists and religionists, which means woke versus sleep. That's on the table. Shipwrecks, drugs and medications, refugees and minorities in crisis. This is what's happening. Tough love meets do it yourself. The super rich in super trouble, and love will win in the end. And here we are, 2025. And who can forget that at Trump's inauguration, we had the Episcopal Bishop, Marianne Buddha, and her wonderful, empathic, sensitive, pray to conscience declaration and prayer at that ceremony. He called her, I think, a kook and a troublemaker later, but I think real people saw what was going on. There's my man Bernie. Uniting these energies is what we're talking about, and you can see that it can go into like a crazy direction here when Neptune is either high as a kite on drugs somehow, or full of oneself, as in some sort of megalomaniac. But it can be the inspiration and beautiful ideals. Neptune's also that. Next to Saturn, it says, let's do it. Let's make it happen. That's what's going on. There was such a reaction here earlier just this spring in Canada, and we know that crazy story. And let's make Canada the 51st state. What an idiotic idea that was. But it was such a reaction that or several conservative candidates over there in Canada lost their elections, and then they had more visionary, idealist-minded winners in Canada. And here's an example here of, thank you, Donald Trump, for making it very clear on what we don't want. And again, Bernie Sanders still being consistent after decades and decades. And he's a real inspiration. We're moving, of course, towards 2026, and it's going to be in February next year that they will make their exact aspect. This year, they're not making it. It's not exact, but it's so close. We're feeling it. We feel the winds of change. But next year, next February, March, they will be exact. And wow, so it's going to be basically the second wave of this. Again, I set this here for Washington, D.C., and then you see just how big and strong and important all of this is in the 10th house of the executive powers. The sun's up here. Here is Venus, also in Pisces, North Node in Pisces, Mercury Pisces, and then that alignment here in Aries, and the moon in Aries. So a concentration of a lot of energies up this. The 10th house is about the executive things, who's in charge, new blood, new visions, and then that reaction that we've been seeing from time to time. We've got the Gemini rising, and Gemini, of course, is the twins. That's a split. There's two twins. When we've got so far two parties, I think there may be another party that's coming out. Maybe even it could be even the death of a party, and a new party comes up and takes its place. There's always been a desire in the United States to have three parties, maybe even more, as they do in Europe, but it never seems to happen. It seems to go right back down to two options. We'll see if we can break that. In the meantime, we have got, during that conjunction, we've got the Mars right up here, very close to the midheaven, and it's kind of a dangerous position, but it is close to the United States moon placement, which is at 25 degrees Aquarius, and that's the midheaven here is 24. So the people of the United States get fired up, and I hope that they demand for their rights, for their recognition, for the Constitution, we all can win, really. It shows more of that radical dynamic because in that square over here to the planet Uranus, which is rising at that point, back in Taurus, it was in Gemini going back in Taurus, it makes a square to the midheaven as well as Mars. And again, whenever that happens, it's very volatile. There may be some more shootings, assassinations, and people who just get overly excited. Aries voices. Again, this happened in the spring, and I just bring this up here as just a reminder, as an example of someone that really can stand up, who's already within the system. And I'm thinking, of course, that whoever's going to be making, waves and having some big contribution during this time, they're already players. They just need to have the microphone. J.B. Pritzker gave a barn burning speech to Democrats in New Hampshire. And he said to go big or go home. And it's really worthwhile to take a look at that video of his talk because he was full of energy. And he implored everyone here who's really a patriot to fight everywhere and all at once. Just do it. And so that was written again by one of my heroes, collected by Heather Cox Richardson, Letters from an American. Coming to a conclusion over here, here's a great picture here of the dynamic duo, Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And they have been going into many red states, having their big gatherings and collecting a lot of a fan base. And I'm really proud of both of them. But taking a look at the shifting ideals here, once we are out of the present crisis, and we will be, there will be new leaders and visionaries. When the USA swings back towards care and empathy again, we cannot go back to the classic Democratic Party, which had also been compromised by radicals within their own agendas. That brought us political correctness and endless discussions about toilet privileges and trans athletes. There are much bigger issues to focus upon. And by the way, of course, the Democratic Party also seem to be just fine with our really upsetting policies with Israel, right or wrong, as well as the health insurance program. They just, kept that going, as well as having the biggest military in the world. So yeah, the Democratic Party needs new blood. For too many years, decades, the Democratic platform and candidates were the lesser of two evils. And isn't that rather sad? The last time that the voting public really got excited by the Dems was in 2016 when the Bernie Sanders campaign, and he was an independent prior to that, but there was so much excitement here. But the Democrats just said, we need someone that really is a Democrat. And Bernie Sanders really wasn't. And they lost. Well, actually, they won. Hillary won by 3 million votes. But then were saddled down with the Electoral College, and that should be taken out too. Anyway, Bernie Sanders has been consistent and a voice of fairness and justice. Ideals like Medicare for all, minimum wage increases, the rights of unions, international justice, and not blindly supporting Israel. It's part of the new vision. When both of the planets, when both are in a proper perspective and they're working ideally with each other. And that again reminds me of some of the 1989 ideals where some countries gained their independence in a peaceful manner, but then they were independent. They were calling their own shots. They were truly stepping into their own. And that's what I hope for the United States and for other countries at this time. And there it is. Yes, it was probably a little bit longer than I planned, but I had a lot to say. And I hope this will be of help in keeping the course during these times of tropical storms and earthquakes in the exciting Saturn Neptune conjunction of 25 and 26. Blessings to all. Let's do it right.